On this installment of Creative Cabin Fever, we have a returning guest. You may remember Keego. He is obviously from Diablo DC. He's also a good friend of mine. How do you get a second to interview with a Vibe Queen? The answer is very simple. First off, you send her really cool merch. So Keego was cool enough to actually send me branded condoms for whenever I'm having a good time. May I remember him and his incredible band. The other thing he did is share a love and passion for Bush. Not only do we share this love and passion, we share a t-shirt. Keego, show everyone.
Let me just lift mine up there as well. There we are. Because it actually freaked me out when we talked the first time, because I think there's only one other, I remember in school, there was one other person who discovered Bush, the band, at the same time. And then, how long ago was that? Let's say it was 5 years ago. I was in school. I started speaking to you, and it was a throwaway comment, and I was like, Jesus, what's happening here? There's two of us. So it's been a magical time ever since.
Yeah, because we actually send each other Bush links every so often. Did you see this song? Did you see what they did? And I've enjoyed that throughout lockdown. So we've actually got this really good friendship through music, which is kind of the whole point of music, I think.
It's what Gav would have wanted, I feel. He wants to bring people together. And so I just wish he'd wear a top more often than he does. But that's a separate issue entirely. We might be differing on that.
37 emails later, he still hasn't okayed an interview. Look, so like.
Okay, number 38, the magic number, the lucky number 38. That's it. Next one. Send a picture of you in the t-shirt, and then one of us is going to interview you, Gav. Which one do you want? And he's definitely not going to pick me.
Because you're a very interesting character. So the reason I'm interviewing you today is you've started a newish project, which weirdly enough ties into one of my loves and the thing that pretty much got me here. So you have a comedy trio chat show, effectively, one that I got roasted on last night and loved every second of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's weird. Like, we met through music, and music is obviously my first love, our first love. But obviously, it was in a band, WDC, going really well. And then just as lockdown hits, people. Let's be nice here. People aren't into the work. There's a lot of work behind it. It's not just the sexy stuff. And some people were just a little bit uninterested, flaky in continuing that work. So instead of, hitting my head off a wall, I just kind of fell back into something I started in February, which was the kind of stand-up comedy stuff. So I had loads of gigs before lockdown, and then as lockdown kicked off, everything goes to Zoom. And I met my fellow, so the show every Thursday at 8 o'clock is called The Party Tits. We're on Facebook, live through there, and YouTube and all these things. We met at the last 3D gig in town in the Workman's. On the dart home, we started talking half cut. And then the next day, we all kind of messaged each other around the same time saying, right, we're going to be locked down forever here. Do you fancy having a chat every week? And initially it was going to be just the three of us on Zoom, throwing stuff at each other. Not for public consumption. And then all of a sudden it kind of blew up into this thing. And I think Thursday is the great day to start the weekend, because Fridays don't really count. And then, people seem to be responding well. So we're going to do a couple of live shows over Christmas, which will be great fun. But yeah, and then we roasted you yesterday. So that was kind of the lead up to now.
Yeah, a lot of people I'd forgotten. Like, I tried to change my name on Facebook actually recently enough, because I was like, okay, maybe I should go back to being professional. But the story behind the Toblerone is actually quite a funny one. So I was like, I'm not actually going to change it because it's too much work. But effectively, about 20 years ago, someone I was working with made a comment that because I grew up in Switzerland and I was a little bit nuts, but I was mostly sweet and had great peaks, I was effectively a Toblerone.
I like that.
So it stuck.
Yeah. Sweet with mostly great peaks. I like that. I think that's going to go on a t-shirt as well. I think that's a good one. So that makes sense. But then it's very difficult to roast that without the context.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to tell anyone that, so that we can roast you again next week.
I do like the sponsorship angle, because I really do need to start getting sponsorship. I can't keep doing these interviews for free.
So if anybody, for the millions of people who missed it, obviously we were wondering where the Toblerone came from, and Ben, who is the right party tit, he was wondering, was it a sponsorship issue? And then that set off the alarm bells for everyone. Who would you sell your middle name to? You know. So yeah, Toblerone obviously has to jump on board here.
Exactly. So we'll have to figure this out. I'll have to get them on because I'm always pushing other people to get sponsorship from whoever I think suits their brand. So I think I'm next on that list, and Toblerone definitely. You know, merch, like bands are sending me stuff like t-shirts and stuff, which is amazing. Actually, I was saying to you off camera, there's a Waterford band called Woody with a Y, and they got me a custom made mask. And I just thought that's the sweetest thing ever. I just opened the post, and then Foxjaw the other day sent me the rest of the vinyl I didn't own yet. So they sent me their whole entire back catalogue. So now I have everything. It was just like, that's so kind.
Like when you receive vinyl, that's like getting a mixtape in the 80s. Like that's pure unadulterated love. Like that's just ridiculous. I no one's ever sent me vinyl, so no one loves me. I got an iTunes voucher once. That's as close as I got to vinyl.
I'll figure something out.
No, that's not me fishing for presents. It's okay. But no, vinyl. I was over at the old man's house going through his record collection just before second lockdown, and it's just when you take the vinyl out, you can smell that wax, and I was like, oh, give that to me, please. But no, I have to. It's in the will.
You'll get it one day.
But we were talking before about merch and all this sort of stuff, and I think there's a lot of weird stuff going on. Like the condom thing was like pissed one night. I kind of thought, how do we get the band name into people's brains? And you're going to go, well, what do we do that is mostly enjoyable for everyone? It's riding, you know. Well, no, only if it's good. Now, if it's bad, there's nothing worse. But I think if they're having a good time, they'll think about us. It's like, oh, okay. But if it's unused, then you feel all sad.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it forever because I just love it. Like, I don't know, maybe when Keanu's older and he goes through my memory box of rock and roll, because there is a memory box of rock and roll, and he finds this, right? It's like, yeah, so I was doing the same thing. But I think the condom idea is brilliant. And I just want to say that sex is never really that bad. It's kind of like pizza. Even when it's not good, at least you had it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
Do you know? I don't know.
Well, that's true. Well, it depends. You see, like, you know, I'm more just quietly grateful to be involved. So that's kind of my end of things. But you know, everyone, it's like music. There's different ways to do everything, I suppose. Some people actually, we weren't going to talk about it, but I read the other day about people who like to dress up as furry animals. Have you read about this?
Oh, I know all about the huddle piles.
Oh my God. I'm so sheltered in Bray. I did not know about this.
Yeah, I've known about this for years, but only because I saw a whole episode about it on CSI Miami about 20 years ago. And then it like opened this thing up for me. So they were basically at a furry convention and someone gets murdered in a huddle pile. And this is a CSI Miami episode. Okay.
Oh, where are my sunglasses? I could see a bit at the beginning. I don't know what sort of pun he would make at the beginning, but it would be fantastic.
Yeah. It's a great episode. You should probably go back and look at it.
I will. I'm due to do a bit of work today, but I'm not going to bother. I'm going to find that episode because the best bit about that is there's a ginger fella in the sun in Miami, and you can just see him in the beginning burning up. There's a bit of Irish in him, and he's just burning up under the sun. He's still so cool. Horatio Caine. What a man.
Horatio Caine is an Adonis. Like, do you know what I mean? He's got that real, like, he's a man of a certain age with an intellect that solves murder.
Yeah, and he also, what's the one? I found a man with oranges, apples, and bananas in his ear. He was a trifle deaf, you know, all this sort of stuff. What a man. Although I haven't seen it in 100 years, but I need to watch it again.
Yeah, I've been watching the Bake Off. Like, I finally have given in and stopped watching just music documentaries and music interviews because I feel my brain might actually need a bit of junk.
I
It's going
can't
on
stop
8 months.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
Yeah. Well, Bake Off is like pornography for certain people. Like, and it's like Big Brother. You're sitting in your house watching people sitting in the house. You know, you're cook. You know, people are cooking their dinner, watching people cook their dinner. You know, it's a very weird, you know, psychological deconstruction of the human. We don't actually want to be stimulated. You know. Oh, look at those cakes.
my other half was wondering why I was really grumpy watching the Bake Off, but it turns out it's just because there was no sugar in the house. So I had sugar withdrawal, which anyone who knows me well knows that I'm like addicted to sweet things. So
So you're just watching it going, look at all that fucking sugar. Look at the sugar.
I wouldn't
Look,
mind,
get
but
me
he's a
some sugar.
chef. I was like, go in the kitchen now and make me a cake.
That's only fair. You know, whenever you need sugar, the sugar daddy has to go make some sugar.
I think so. I think that's how that works.
Yeah, that's a quadruple entendre there. It's too early on a Friday for that. Oh my God.
Bringing us back to a topic we were on a little bit earlier.
Oh yeah.
The music industry is tough. And you're completely right. A situation like lockdown is incredibly difficult. So it does make, you know, some people are going to persevere and some people are going to need to take a step back and just concentrate on the other aspects of life. And as glorious and amazing and rock and rolly as things like condoms and merch are, there is a harder work element involved. So there's been a bit of controversy and there's definitely been chat surrounding the recent grants. And I just want to have like a casual conversation maybe about both our opinions of that, you know what I mean? Because it's a very tough time, right? So I always say that bands in Dublin are kind of blessed, right? So you like a lot of people that I talk to from Dublin do not see what it's like, or even close enough to Dublin, like Bray, like yourself, right? What it's like for bands outside. Whereas my whole entire life is dedicated to showing the world the forgotten city, which is Waterford. Okay. So I see what it's like for bands down here. I know how hard it is to be seen outside. I know how difficult it would be. Like it would be probably inconceivable for a Waterford band to get funding on something like that because they just wouldn't be seen because, you know, they're not in that golden circle, we'll call it. You know what I mean? So without people kind of pushing, so it's hard for me not to be like, yeah, I can see why this is something inflammatory to certain people. Like, do you know what I mean? And at the same time, I can see that everyone who got the grant is really hard working person who knows how to fill out a grant form, because that to me is one of the bigger problems. Like, how do you even start filling out a form for grants? Like, so much of your soul and information is in there and it's not in a normal way of speaking. It's very repetitive format. Like I've been looking into grants myself. That's how I know, because I've been working on a few different projects trying to get funding, right? But yeah, so it's a very complex, hard to navigate topic. Yeah. And obviously you were part of a thread the other day, which I needed to grab popcorn for because I knew most of the people on it. And I was like,
oh, it was so much fun. Yeah. No, but I think you're right. I think laying context to this conversation is really important because you're absolutely right. I don't know what it's like to be a band in Waterford. I've no idea. Now, also, I think no one in any art form that is subjective should be expecting anything. So, in order to put yourself in the shop window for one of these grants, you've got to, if they want a grant, you have to fill that in properly. If you fill it in properly, you've got to deal with everyone you meet in a nice way. All this sort of stuff, because it is, even though there is a golden circle, as you call it, and there's everywhere else, it's still a small scene. It's still, we're 3 hours from one end of the island to the other. It's tiny, and everyone knows everyone, and especially things like when you put stuff up online, it travels really fast. So they're going to go, right, look at the grant. They're going to look and listen to the music. They're going to ask around, who knows you, where are you from, have you played gigs, give us a review, have you talked to them, what do they like, kind of thing. And they're the main things that you need to do. Now it's the same in business. If you open a shop and you're going for a loan in the bank, you still have to fill in that form, and you have to fill in the form correctly. If you don't fill in the form correctly, you're gone. If you can't fill in the form, learn how to do it, or you're gone. That's it. It doesn't matter if your shop is a good idea or your band is good. So I think you're dead right. There is a difference. I think you've got to arm yourself with the knowledge to fill in forms, or if you don't know, talk to someone who does know. It's a small circle. Now, all of that mixed with lockdown, which is rotten on people's mental health, self-esteem, all of this sort of stuff, as well as the constant rejection of any sort of art form. It's a triangle of doom, basically, if we're thinking about it. So some people are not cut out for that, number one. That's it. The rejection into things is so crippling that it takes something different to get through that. You know that yourself. I've been on the end of that too. It's a weird thing that you have to get through all that stuff. Now, if we go into the thread the other day when I think it was 2 of the 3 lists came out from FMC, there were again, no names. Names aren't important here. It's just the general demeanor. There were people who I hadn't heard of and had heard of. So from 2 ends of the spectrum, right? Touring musicians and people who I hadn't heard of. And that's not me trying to slag anyone off. I know nothing. Giving out that they didn't get a grant. Both coming from the end, both blaming other things. So people were blaming music colleges, a hatred of a genre. And basically that was pretty much what it was. It was all an excuse. And when you delve into this, and I think it's worthwhile everyone finding the thread. Are we allowed to? Do you want to mention where it is, or?
Yeah, you're absolutely allowed to say whatever you want on my show. So whatever you want to say, you say.
Okay, well, it's up there on the Niler 9 page there, which is it's a great resource in general, and 99% of it is fantastic. It was just this thread wound me up. Maybe I hadn't had enough coffee, but it was the sense no one is entitled to anything in any walk of life. You've got to work hard. Now, I'm assuming everyone is working hard, but not everyone is. I was in a band where not everyone was working hard. So let's say you do that, you work hard, right? That doesn't guarantee or mean that you're entitled to anything. This is essentially a grant, an investment in you. And that's where the other 2 steps kick in. Now, documentation is one thing, but they're also going to ask around. They're going to go to Rebecca and go, have you dealt with these people? Or they're going to go to the equivalent up in Dublin. Have you dealt with these people? And based on the thread of these 2 people, one again who we've all heard of and one who a lot of us wouldn't have heard of, they both dealt with it the same way. And if they go to, if the people making the decisions go to someone and ask what are they like, they're going to be told that they're bell ends. You don't give money to bell ends. So we've also got to balance that out with what you were saying, which you were being very rational and reasonable, which is great. I am not, where it's tough times, and you've got to understand that being outside Dublin is a kick in the nuts, or whatever your genitalia is. It's not easy, and that's absolutely correct. But it doesn't excuse bad behavior. That's only my thoughts. I've waffled on a bit there, but it doesn't excuse bad behavior.
No, I agree. Okay, so I know pretty much everyone or a lot of people under that thread, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing I hadn't thought of before is you're completely right. Like, people come to me the whole time behind the scenes and ask me about local bands and what they are personality-wise or what they were to work with, and I actually have probably a lot more say. Some people in my, in my heel do have open, honest conversations about behaviors and how working with certain people might have been challenging and stuff like that. So yeah, how you treat others in the industry, because it's such a small industry, does carry far. So that's definitely something to consider. Filling out forms, it's a head wreck. Being outside of Dublin, it does make it that bit harder. It doesn't make it inachievable, however, and it certainly doesn't make it okay to, in a moment of stress, which we all have, to go into someone else's Facebook page and attack their band, because I respect both bands. That, you know what I mean? I have interviewed both bands. I have had good banter with both bands. I just thought that was a different level of You know, if you're there to, in my opinion, right, and I will say this to his face, and I am saying it to his face, in my opinion, if you're there to have a balanced argument about how unfair you believe the grant system is, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then don't start on another musician who's also struggling just because you can, because that's different. That's completely different to the grant system is unfair. That is you actually being cruel.
Well, I have a question. If you were there with your finger on the button of the grant, right, in general, let's say this time next year, they apply again, and you go, I like the album they did. They went DIY for the year. They saved their money, recorded it. Now they want to tour it. I believe in this band, and you Google them and you find that thread.
Straight
Are
away,
you
no.
going to give them 100%? And I think nearly every person after the initial bit of crack had tried to say that to this person, and they just didn't get it. The excuse was to blame absolutely everyone else. You know, they say they work hard or they've been everywhere and all sorts of.
We all work hard.
100%. 100%.
I work.
But it was just the inability to understand that it's not, when anything is subjective, you can't, it's not maths, it's not 1 and 1 is 2. It's who are you? What do you like? Would I invest in you? Which is what a grant is. You know, and he just urinated all over his own feet for that entire thread. And it's interesting. Everyone should go and have a look at it anyway and see how you think, how you feel. Now, that's an issue. I think, you know, the arrogance and entitlement is a massive problem. But I also think that on the other side, and you know, before we started talking, you being the devil's advocate here, there is a golden circle. There is a decision maker who and again, no names, but there's a decision maker who picks their friends, and that is a problem. That's a massive problem. But that can't be changed. So you've got to work within the system. You've got to educate yourself on what the system is. If you've got to work your way around that system, if you feel you need a grant, you've got to play that game.
Yeah, that's just unfortunately not just the music industry, right? That's every single industry in the world. There has to be someone making decisions, and it's that person's choice. And
that's it. Like, and at the end of the day, it's free money. It's money that just doesn't exist in your universe, in my universe, in anyone's universe. It'd be a welcome help, but you've got to live your life as if it doesn't exist. It's never happening, and fill in the form on the off, and fill in everything properly on the off chance that you might get in the shop window, whether it's for a grant or whether it's for a gig that they run. That's another thing. It's not just about the money. It's about they run showcase gigs and all sorts of stuff. And when you pull stunts like that, whether you are the one who everyone knows or the one that people don't know, neither of you are going to get a shot because you're acting like babies.
Yeah, there has to be a level of maturity like involved. Like, I understand that rejection is never fun and it leaves a nasty taste in everyone's, but being proactive as opposed to reactive is probably what would aid anyone in a future journey. We're all going to get turned down. We're all going to get rejected. How we go forth with that, what we actually do from that falling down or rejection, that's what makes us. Like, stumbling blocks are there to build us up. Like,
yeah, if life was easy, everyone would do it, and not everyone does it. So that's why, because it's not easy. And you know, I do find that if they reacted this way to something that isn't in their universe, it doesn't exist. How do they deal with rejection in real life? You know, and that's a worry. That's like just a general psychological worry, because, you know, as we were talking before this, you know, when you look at the list of people, there are questions to be asked of the system, 100%. And I don't think anyone would disagree with that. You've got people on 3 different lists. You've got people who have released second albums and they paid for it already. You've got people who aren't releasing music. Like, so it's all a question to be asked. But
you've got certain people who are still in the process of recording one that haven't even dropped it and who've been like okayed. So things like that are definitely, you're right. The things we should be questioning, but we should be doing that in a mature debate, like the way me and you are, without feeling a need to lash out at anybody, without feeling a need to name names, because it's up to everyone to make up their own mind and see how they feel about these things. And effectively, we can't really change grants.
No, exactly. Exactly. And like you're in a subjective art form. That's it. And that's not, that's not coming from a place of ill will. Hopefully everyone could pay their mortgage from music or art or whatever. That'd be ideal. The world would be a better place. But we can't, unfortunately. Some of us have to work in a bank or wherever you work, and that's soul destroying too. But I think the main thing to take away, only from my side, is if you act like a child, you'll be treated like a child, especially when you're a grown up. And when you react to strangers online, and again, I poured a little bit of petrol on him, which didn't help. And look, I do that every once in a while, and that's something I shouldn't do. But there shouldn't have been fire to put petrol on. It's very, very simple. But do go look at the thread, everyone, and see what you think. Read through it with a cup of coffee or something stronger, and just see what you think, because that's how people were reacting to it. More, what did how much did they hand out? I have it on the other screen here. I don't know how much they handed out. 280, 443, and Jesus, loads here. 280, 443, and 897. So what is it? 1.5 mil or something like that.
Yeah. Between three different grants.
And there's a lot of savage acts. Like, go through that list and lash them into Spotify, and have a listen, because these are all hard-working Irish bands, whether they have an album released or not released or whatever. They're all working hard. You've got May-Kay from the Apes in there now. That's how hard she's been working. She's been working for 100 years. They should give her 1.5 mil. You know what I mean? Like, she's an absolute genius and got fucked around by the system and stuff like that. So people like that, who are constantly working, constantly helping people, are beyond a resource, beyond a value. But if you act like a child, you will be treated like a child. And I really shouldn't fan those flames. But some people are idiots.
Look, it's just the way it is. The thread is really interesting to me as well, because it shows many different points of view. So when I read the thread initially, I was like, okay, I don't like the way he's put it, but I completely understand where he's coming from. And as I said, not many people outside of Dublin would even understand how much more difficult it is when you're from outside, right? So like, a lot of the conversations I have, it's like, why do you fight so hard for Waterford? Because we're not seen. Like nobody sees us. If there's not somebody going, hey, I know all of ye, do you know that you'd sound good with this person? Then you're not going to get seen unless you get really, really lucky. And chances are you're not going to get lucky, because the amount of work and perseverance that needs to be done for something like that to happen. But at the same time, I fight really hard for everyone to be seen. So it's kind of, do you know what I mean? But yeah, I can understand that their heart was absolutely broken. But the way it was written and the way they reacted to other people's reactions is where the problem lies. But a lot that was said under that thread was very interesting. Like, a lot of people weren't necessarily ganging up on them. They were like, no, we understand what you're saying, but this is this. And then the reality is grants are absolutely ridiculous to fill out.
But it's like, you know what I mean? If you yourself, for your business, for your show, are looking for a grant, and you yourself aren't fully armed and able to fill in a grant, what do? You find someone who can fill in a grant. Learn from them. If you can't afford the course or whatever, which is fine, everything is really expensive, you learn about the process and make yourself better at doing that process. That's it. You don't fill in, why should we give you the grant? Because we're deadly. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta go through all this sort of stuff. And that's kind of it's part of the reason why I kind of jumped away from a band situation and into recording music on my computer, because that band is ruined now by his reaction to not getting a grant. I'm sure the rest of the guys maybe they did post and I didn't recognize their name, but that whole band is now, in my mind, just stained with his comments, and I'm sure they're brilliant. That's the problem. So now, in a year, if they're putting on a showcase and they go, these guys were close last year, we lashed them on, and then they go find that thread. It's like, there's no way. They're gonna have to change their name, change their singer, change everything, whatever he does. I don't know. It's not just one moment. It's not just one piece of time. That's them fucked for a long time.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, because that sort of stuff, it travels fast. Even if you were to take it down now, chances are it's already been screenshotted. Like, it's like, do you remember a few weeks ago, I was up in arms? Everyone was up in arms. Out of nowhere, there was that drummer podcast, right? And that got taken
Oh,
down.
yeah.
Okay. I found the podcast. I've listened to it 3 times, start to finish. And I actually kind of understand why he said what he said after listening to it 3 times in context. Because he just has an ego problem. So he just genuinely, and by the way, phenomenal drummer, right? One of the best drummers I've ever seen, because I also went looking to see, is he actually as good as he claims to be? And he actually is as good as he claims to be, right? So I don't have a problem with someone knowing they're good and being proud of that and thinking everyone else is shit, like, because he worked really hard to be that good at drumming, right? So taking out of context that little piece where he talks about women in the industry the way he does, he talks about everyone in the industry the way he does. So that wasn't just him. You know what I mean? If you look at the whole piece and you listen to it the 3 times, but that went viral to a point where he was off all social medias. And now I think that inflammatory 56-second clip that was used for that podcast has really damaged his reputation, and possibly the reputation of the 2 other drummers on board, who probably should have thought better. You know, it's kind of like when Trump did that stupid comment and everyone's like, oh, boys will be boys. No, conversations need to be had. Like, it's difficult being a woman in the industry, and that's definitely something we need to challenge and question, just the way we're challenging and questioning grants and stuff. But yeah, in context, I'm not really sure what he said. No, what he said is bad, right? So how do I say this? What he said is bad, but in context to everything else he said, it's just genuinely how he perceives the world.
Yeah, he's a bell end to everybody, not just women. You know what I mean? And that doesn't excuse what he says, but it doesn't spike. You know what I mean? When it's a 50-second clip, it doesn't spike if you know he's a dickhead to everybody. But the problem is, he's got to be smart enough to know that I don't know him. I'd never heard of him before this 50-second clip. Once you say something like that, and I don't know, against only me, I don't know who you are. I've no interest in finding anything out about you. You're a better person than me. You took the time. I never took the time. I've no interest. If you talk like that about people, I've no interest. That's it. I'm not going to find out if you're any good or anything like that. You're gone, deleted. I don't have time up here for any of that sort of shite. And it is stuff like that which kind of knocks. Imagine being a woman drummer listening to that, you know what I mean? And maybe if you're a woman drummer and you follow this person, maybe he's important in the drumming circles, I don't know. But you kind of go, this guy's good, I'm going to learn from him, from YouTube or whatever. And all of a sudden he says that. You go, I'm going to stop this, like. And that's a great drummer, regardless of gender. That's a great drummer that just is never going to join a band, gone. And that's, we need more musicians. We need more women equal opportunity is all it is. If it's equal opportunity, women take over the world. That's it. And I think that's, unfortunately, you look at what was the school during the week that said that girls can't wear leggings. It's like, we are still petrified of women on every level, and strong women, I've got to watch my language here. Strong women scare pussy men. Remember that.
It's really, really true. There's so many strange things happening, like even the leaking of all those pictures during the week.
Yeah.
And men still thinking it's okay to share that stuff. Like, if I feel that it's okay for me to send my partner a naked picture, it's definitely not so he can show it to all his friends. Consent still exists even after it's just a picture. Like, just because I'm not in your face doesn't mean you have the consent to send this to everyone. So this whole boys club needs to change, and men needs to realize that being a boy is very different to being a man. End of. Like,
yeah. And it's a really weird kind of generational thing, because like, I'm 100 years older than you. There was no mobile phones came out when I was in 5th year in school, and and there was another 6 or 7 years before you could send a picture. You know what I mean? So like it's a very different game to me than now, where it's just like, if you loved a woman back in the day and you wanted to send a naked picture, you'd have to buy a roll of film, get it developed in a chemist, and post it to her. You know what I mean? And hope her ma didn't open the second post. Like, it was true love back then. Whereas now it's just click it on your phone, and it means nothing. And so, because it's not the fella, because it's a girl, it's not, there's no currency behind it. They put it up so I can share it anywhere. It's like, no, that's not how
What
this
I
shit works.
found really, really, really upsetting wasn't even so much what the men were saying under a thread similar, right? So there was a thread about a girl locally who was on OnlyFans, and she had been interviewed by a newspaper, and a woman went, she had no problem charging for those pictures, but why does she have a problem with them being shared? And I was like, okay, so your car is for sale at the moment outside your house. I really like it, but I don't feel like paying you for it. So I'm just going to take your car. You're okay with that, right? Because you were looking to sell it.
Just give me the keys. It's grand. Yeah, I'll take it off your hands.
Consent for everything. I do not judge anyone on what they choose to do with their lives, bodies, or anything. If they have not consented for somebody else seeing those images, regardless of whether it is for money in exchange or whether it is purely out of love and stupidity, you are completely okay and correct in saying that it is wrong for your pictures to be shared without your knowledge and consent. End of.
If something is not sent to you, it is not your business. It is very, very simple. And I'm sure on all of these sites that you sign up for, it says these are not for district. It's like, you don't, back in the day, you don't steal a film. It's the same thing on these websites, I'm sure, where you signed up terms and conditions that you're not going to rob all this stuff. The world is very, very sick, you know what I mean? And that's, without getting too deep into it, there's a higher percentage of people are dickheads.
Really?
Yeah, I think because it's like, the internet is great, but the problem is, like, I could have the craziest thoughts in my head, right, that without the internet will stay there. But now I can go to Google and go, right, does anyone else like dressing up as a furry animal and piling on top of each other on Killiney Hill? And there'll be thousands of us up. That's not a real story, but there'll be thousands of people who might be into that. Keego dresses up as a hairy monkey.com. But no, that's the problem with the internet. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, if it's not yours, you don't own it. That's it. It's not yours to share.
Absolutely.
And one day it'll all come back. One day it'll all come back around. It's going to be, I'm not necessarily saying it's going to be male pictures, but there'll be a situation where they need help, and they'll be very badly damaged by it.
I tend to agree with that. Yeah, what you do has a funny way of coming back on you.
100%.
Keego, would you like to talk about your show a little bit more before we end our incredible conversation that's been so varied, which resembles your show, except I did not really roast you in return, which I wouldn't do because my show is a bit more music-y serious.
Highbrow, yeah. No, well, no, as I said, we kind of met on the train and started this thing. That last night was episode five, I think.
Yeah.
Every Thursday, 8:00, and we have a different theme every week. So the first week was firsts, and you kind of talk about that. People jump in on the comments about their firsts, whatever it was. Second week was Halloween, where we all dressed up. That was a pretty fun one. And then we moved into we did a little bit about Joe Biden, which maybe politics is not something you need to talk about on a Thursday night. But then jumped into a toga party, which was great. That was great fun. Loads of people who tuned in wore their toga parties and wore their togas, and it was great fun. And then last night we had Sinead Quinlan from The Den, which is just madness that The Den is back, and it's showing the world that it's a bit of a mad spot. But we just get in there and just talk. We don't talk about COVID. We try to avoid politics or religion or any of that sort of shite. It's all just as if you're at a party sitting on the stairs having a chat with your mates after a few beers or whatever. That's all it is. So and then eventually we're going to jump into doing live shows where each of us will do a set, and then we'll do a kind of we'll sit around with the audience and have an old chat with them like we do online. So we're hoping to get that lined up. But do jump in, and maybe one day we'll get you in to experience the full party tits vibe or situation or issue or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed last night for as long as I could tune in, and I loved being roasted. And I love that you were talking about Debsies and all sorts of topics that are really interesting. And it's very interesting to have like an extra guest in the fold as well, I'd say, for you guys. So that show is called The Party Tits. And as Keego said, it's findable on the Facebooks. Is it on YouTube yet?
We have it on YouTube as well.
Okay.
I think instead of the I, because Zuckerberg hates tits, we have an asterisk, I think we have, or just put tits into Google and you'll find it.
You'll find it.
There's nothing else in there.
And it goes up on Spotify as well, which is brilliant. If you don't want to look at their faces, you can listen to their voices.
Exactly. Yeah, my face is an acquired taste, so you can put me in your ears instead.
He had the bobblehead on the show last night, and I mentioned it, but nobody else was paying attention to his screen, so it seemed like I was going mental. And on that, and on that note, Keego, I'm going to stop recording. Thank you so much for your time.
Cheers. Happy Friday.